let's say I have the ability to speak French and to play guitar and to debate these topics, right? I have that power to do all three of those things, but I am not presently actualizing all three of those powers. I'm only actualizing the power to debate at this point in time, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, in terms of dunamis in the New Testament Greek, I have the power to create or to do those things, but I'm not always actualizing that power.
I see. So we would say that being the creator is God's dunamis and not his attribute, right?
Well, it becomes an attribute when he creates, just like providence. I mean, God wasn't eternally provident because providence requires a created order to be provident over. So he had the power of providence eternally, but he didn't become provident until he created the world and became and was providentially over the world. And so there's nothing wrong with speaking of providence as an attribute of God, but it's not identical to the eternal, what Palamas calls natural attributes.
If we think that all of the attributes of God are synonymous with the divine essence, then there's going to be a problem when we ask questions that have to do with attributes related to time and space and history and attributes that are strictly eternal. Okay, so providence of God is different because it's a relation. It's an attribute, an operation of God that applies to creation. Okay, the love of God, the glory of God, does not apply only to creation. It's eternally so. And even if God had not created, he would eternally be glorious. He would eternally be loving. Okay. But providence is different from that because there's no such thing as an eternal providence. Right. Now, Origen is going to make this argument. He's going to say, if you equate providence with the essence of God, and if you equate fatherhood with the essence of God, like Aquinas does, then it only makes sense to say that there's a creation that God is eternally father and provident over. Exactly. And we're also going to see that when we apply the same principle to putting the forms of things in the essence of God, like Augustine and Aquinas do, that the reflected forms in creation have to also exist. Therefore, the created forms are just as eternal as the essence of God. And if they're not just as eternal, they have to be created. They were necessarily created. If there's an eternal form in the essence of God of the world, let's say, creation, then it has to come to be, right? Well, yeah, because it's in the essence of God. And what is it? What is it that's in the essence of God, supposedly? Well, the form, the essence of creation, right? Well, what is it? It's a created world. Does it exist? Well, it exists, maybe not yet. Okay, then God creates it. Why did he create it? Because it was eternally in his essence. This is ridiculous. God didn't have to create the world. We all know this. We all know God freely chose to create the world. Well, if he freely chose to create the world, then it wasn't created on the basis of being an eternal reflection of form in his divine essence. Okay, the created world is not a reflection of an eternal form in the essence of God. This is preposterous. In the good, there is another kind of eternity than the divine essence. That is the discourses against the Arians. Now, why would Athanasius say there is a different kind of eternity in God than the divine essence? Well, because there was an eternity that related to the aeon, right? St. Maximus talks about this in the Vladimir Losky lecture. And that's because creation is not a determined action, but a free action. So the uncreated energies, some of them can relate to creation, and they're not of necessity. But they are, as Father Florovsky calls them, willed